Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Space Muffin. This is the Void Playground, and today we have a very special episode. We're going to be talking about Square Enix's most successful franchise, having sold over 100 million copies worldwide. We're talking about Final Fantasy, guys. So, JD, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
JD, I'm tired, but I'm ready to go. So,
That
JD,
sounds
I'll
good.
ask you this. Oh, no. I'll ask you this, JD. What is your experience with Final Fantasy as a franchise?
So for me, Final Fantasy is one of my top favorite video games of all time. I played the original Final Fantasy on the PlayStation 1, and then moving forward to all the others. Right now, I am currently replaying Final Fantasy 7 Remastered, just on my off time right now. And
The remake or
the remake,
okay,
sorry, the
gotcha.
remake. Yeah, and then yeah, I just love the franchise. There has been some disappointments in the past, but other than that, it's a very, very solid series.
So I am not the biggest Final Fantasy fan in the world, but I do have enough knowledge to obviously talk about the franchise. So 1987 was when the first Final Fantasy was released.
Mm-hmm.
And this was supposed to be the last, like, the reason why it's called Final Fantasy is because that's all they could afford to make. And if this game failed, they couldn't do another one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have much experience with Final Fantasy, the first one. I know they just released the Pixel remasters. For those of you who want to play Final Fantasy 1 through 6, you can get the Pixel remasters. But my experience with this game was really on the Game Boy Advance, when Final Fantasy 1 and 2 came with it was called the Two Soul, or Dawn of Souls is what it was
Dawn of
called.
Souls, yeah.
And so that's kind of my experience with Final Fantasy 1 and 2. Guys, this is the one that started it all, and a lot of Final Fantasy, the first one was inspired by like things like D&D, a lot of Western properties. The first Final Fantasy was inspired by. Not the best Final Fantasy, but I think it's definitely, it's the one that started it all. What do you have to say about the first Final Fantasy game, JD?
Okay, the first one for me, it looking back at it, it was okay. But as a kid playing it, it was like the best video game I ever played as a kid. But now it's like looking back as an adult, it was like you said, it was okay. You know, for me, my most favorite one of all, and I wish they did like another remaster of this for the new generation consoles, is Final Fantasy X. That's still my favorite.
We're gonna get to that. So the infamous. Okay, so Final Fantasy first one was released in 1987. The second one, Final Fantasy 2, the infamous Final Fantasy 2, was released in 1988 for the Family Computer. And this game it's infamous. It's considered to be one of the worst in the series. Similar style, similar art style, similar themes. The first 6 games kind of a similar, that 2D kind of pixely situation. But Final Fantasy 2, terrible game. If you guys want to play it, yeah, it's worth at least picking up and checking out. It's like I said, you can get the Pixel remaster version on the Switch or the PlayStation 4 or on Steam, or even on iOS and Android. So there's many ways to play this game. If you're curious, if you're a Final Fantasy buff, this is one to check out. Otherwise, yeah, I wouldn't look at this one. JD, what's your thoughts on Final Fantasy 2?
Final Fantasy 2, again, like as a kid, it was fun, but now looking back at it, as you said, it was a total disappointment. Again, like I said at the beginning, some of the games are in this franchise are hit and miss. But I still love it. This is my favorite series of all time. But again, 2, it was a miss for me. Now that I played it as an adult.
So, guys, 1990 rolls around. I mean, it's older than me. 1990 rolls around. Final Fantasy 3 comes out. Now, keep in mind, guys, that Final Fantasy 6 for the Super Nintendo, that was called Final Fantasy 3. So in the West, we got Final Fantasy 6. So don't get confused. So Final Fantasy 3, guys, things picked up really good. Final Fantasy 3, just a lot of good stuff. It combines a lot of elements of the first two, and obviously introduces some new features. This was a pretty good one, actually, guys. This is one, it's set 1,000 events before the events in the game, on a floating kind of hovering. There's an earthquake basically that opens up, and there's some fun stuff that happens, and crystals and light, and so then you have the Dark Warriors that come out. Like I can't like summarize the whole plot, but this is when things like start like having kind of serious plots. Is in the third one, and you're going to start to see themes, with the Final Fantasy series. Once again, guys, this is an anthology series, meaning that each game is its own contained world. Obviously, there are some mainline games with sequels, such as Final Fantasy X and 13, but it's for the most part an anthology series. And obviously, guys, we're talking about the main series. We might talk about some of the spinoffs, but yeah. JD, what's your thoughts on Final Fantasy 3? I played the 3D remakes of this game.
So for me, I skipped Final Fantasy 3. I actually, for a while, I stopped playing Final Fantasy, and then I moved on to Final Fantasy X. So which we'll talk about in a little bit later. But from 3
we're gonna
onwards,
get to 10.
I didn't play. Wait, sorry. From 3 on to 7. Sorry, my bad, 7.
Okay, so we're going to kind of breeze through these guys. Okay, so in 1991, a year later for the Super Nintendo, they released Final Fantasy IV. A lot of people look at Final Fantasy as a PlayStation property, but actually Nintendo really, had Square, kind of in the pocket. So this game, Final Fantasy IV, really good, really solid game. Just kind of has an interesting development cycle, but they kind of developed both 4, 5, and 6 for the Super Nintendo. So a lot of interesting stuff behind Final Fantasy IV. They did obviously re-release the game in 2007. And a lot of and the thing about Final Fantasy IV is a lot of Westerners, we didn't get to experience this. In its true form. You know what I mean? But yeah, fun game. You guys should definitely check it out if you're Final Fantasy fans. Final Fantasy V, don't really know much about. Got released in 1992 for the Super Nintendo. I believe, I could be wrong, but this was the first game to introduce chocobos. I could be wrong.
I believe so. I think so.
Yeah. So this one, and this one had a sequel. I believe this was the first Final Fantasy game to have a real sequel. It was kind of an animated deal. It was called Legend of the Crystals. So you guys should definitely once again, for you Final Fantasy buffs out there, there's so much random stuff that I personally didn't even know about, before doing the research. But yeah, this one was pretty critically well received. I think Final Fantasy was getting into their formula by 5, and of course, next couple games we're going to talk about break the formula. So Final Fantasy VI, guys, arguably one of the greatest video games of all time, arguably one of the greatest Final Fantasy games of all time. In fact, the next 4 games in the series, there was an argument to be made why they are the best in the series. So Final Fantasy VI, we're getting away from the medieval kind of fantasy and going more into a steampunky kind of type situation. This game, a lot of Westerners, this is the classic Final Fantasy. Once again, it was known as Final Fantasy III for the Super Nintendo. Came out in 1994. If there's one 2D Final Fantasy game that you guys need to play, it's this one, Final Fantasy VI. Just a classic game, guys. Just a classic game. Wow. That opening cinematic, guys, really, really good. I actually didn't play this game really until I was like much older, but this game is legendary. Okay, so for those of you who want to get into the series and you're like, I don't want to play through 1 through 5, play 6. Okay, so moving forward, okay, so the first 6 games, we can refer to those as maybe the 2D era of Final Fantasy, okay? So now we're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII, okay? Now,
yes.
So Final Fantasy VII came out in 1997 for the PS1. This game had the biggest shift in the series up until this point. Once again, we're kind of going for steampunky, cyberpunky stuff. You play as dudes with surfboard-sized swords, obviously. The graphics at the time were very visually stunning. JD, what do you want to say about Final Fantasy VII, the original?
Okay, the original one. So this game got me back into Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy VII was really like I played it nonstop on the PlayStation 1 when I got it. Storyline was very great. The side, like all the quests and everything, I thought was really good for the time. For the time, this is like I think the first game that introduced 3D, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
Yeah. So really, like this game really like has a really special place in my heart because it actually propelled me back into the series. I left after 2, and then afterwards got back in when 7 released.
So yeah. Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think for those of you, and I think, okay, so this is kind of an intro. This whole podcast is kind of an introductory to Final Fantasy. Obviously, we're going to talk about the newest one and kind of like, kind of get into the nitty gritty. But in the 3D era, so the early 3D era, the second kind of generation games, so 7 through 10, there's a lot of fun stuff here, a lot of good stuff. Check out 7. Play maybe 5-6 hours of it. If you don't like it, maybe go on to 8 and see what kind of you like. But Final Fantasy VII, a lot of people consider it to be one of the greatest video games of all time. This game was going to get released on the N64, but it would have been too many cartridges, so they just released it for PlayStation. And this is when like Sony and Square really kind of went into their own. Like this is when kind of Nintendo was cut out. So Remake, they kind of changed the characterization of a lot of the characters. Some people like it, some people don't. I've heard a lot of good things about Remake. I played a little bit myself. I haven't played it enough to really to really have a crazy opinion on it. I will say this, guys. Final Fantasy 1 through 10, these are turn-based games. So if you like the newer action RPG Final Fantasy games, you should definitely still check these out for historical purposes, kind of knowing what games came before. But I just want to give you guys a heads up. First 10 games turn-based. So we got to talk about...
Yeah. In a way, I kind of missed the turn-by-turn based type of strategy.
We're gonna get to that once we hit Final Fantasy 12. But is there anything else you want to say about Final Fantasy 7 before we move on?
No, it's just a solid game. If you guys want to pick it up, go ahead, pick it up. Especially the remake. Especially that one is really good. I am currently almost done with it. So
let's preface this real quick. So they did a remaster of Final Fantasy 7 for the PC, and I believe PlayStation 4. So like, if you want to play the original Final Fantasy 7, I definitely recommend checking that out. And then the Final Fantasy 7 remake is kind of a completely different game, like stylistically and a lot of stuff like that. It's more of a reimagining of Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah, basically. But again, like both versions are really solid. I will recommend anybody pick up both versions if you can.
So guys, we need to talk about perhaps one of the most divisive games in the series, the infamous Final Fantasy VIII. Now, at the time, Final Fantasy VIII was the highest selling Final Fantasy game. Came out in 1999. This is my personal favorite Final Fantasy game. I'm not saying it's the best. I'm not saying it has the best story. This game was heavily criticized for the story, but like the gameplay was really great. This game was really good, guys. A lot of like, if Final Fantasy VII is Ride the Lightning, this game might be Master of Puppets. I don't know. If we're using Metallica analogies. They did do a remaster, not a remake, but a remaster of this game, like a full 4K remaster, which definitely, if you're going to play this game, play that version. Really good game, guys. Story is probably the weakest part, but I don't know. JD, what are your thoughts on Final Fantasy VIII?
So rewatching it, revisiting Final Fantasy VIII storyline. Yes, I do agree that now looking back at it through adult eyes, the storyline wasn't that great. But again, as a kid, you're playing and then you're thinking like this is the amazing thing, like this is like the storyline is amazing and everything like that. I do have to agree that now looking at through a grown-up's eyes, the storyline wasn't that great, but I still enjoyed it as a kid. Hours, put in a lot of hours playing this game, and just like again, like it just made me miss my childhood even more.
So this game, obviously, it's really interesting about this game is it uses pre-rendered backgrounds, which kind of it kind of departs from a lot of the previous games. Obviously, we're long past medieval stuff, but what's interesting about Final Fantasy VIII, guys, is it's just kind of like. Okay, actually, let's go back to the story element. So I think a part of the problem with Final Fantasy VIII story is a lot of mistranslation from Japanese to English. And I think that there's a fan translation out there that kind of fixes a lot of the translational errors. So my personal favorite, or one of my favorites, this game is very solid. And I think this game is forever going to go down as one of the greatest JRPGs. Like Final Fantasy 1 through 10, like these are trailblazing games, right? Like trailblazers. So let's talk about. Okay, actually, sorry, I take that back, guys. The next game in the franchise is probably my favorite, Final Fantasy 9.
Final Fantasy. Oh god, 9.
Last game on the PlayStation. I use this term very loosely. Return to form. Came out in July 7th, 2000. The only thing that I'm going to say about this game is go play it. Like, the mage dude, like, it's just so much cool stuff in this game. And I wish, like, this game didn't do well because of kind of the visual art style and a lot of stuff. But this game it's so solid, guys. And you're talking to a guy who just, like, kind of hates the whole franchise, believe it or not. But like it's a love-hate relationship, and this game is so good. JD, Final Fantasy 9, what are your thoughts?
So Final Fantasy 9, it was all right for me. It just nothing beats 7. For me. But Final Fantasy 9, I have to give it. It was an okay game. Growing up, playing it, it just. I don't know how I feel about it. Like now I'm looking back at the footage and everything, it looks okay. Again, so, like 7 is still my favorite from that era.
If 7 is Ride the Lightning, 8 is Master of Puppets. Okay, maybe 7 is Master of Puppets. Maybe 6 is actually Ride the Lightning. And I think about it. And 7 is Master of Puppets. 8, I don't even know what it is. But this is the Injustice for All, guys. This is the Injustice for All game. Once again, doing my Metallica analogy, 10 is the Black Album, obviously.
Oh,
but
yes.
So Final Fantasy 9, guys. Okay, look, 7, 8, and 9, like any one of them are going to be good choices for you. I recommend maybe doing a little bit of research. If you like kind of more traditional fantasy elements, then Final Fantasy 9 might be the game for you. If you like more steampunky, you're part of the, you're playing as like a mercenary, maybe 7 might be the one for you. 7 does have a lot of systems in it as well, compared to these other two, but solid games, guys. So the first Final Fantasy game I played was Final Fantasy X. JD?
Really?
Yes. JD, what are your thoughts on Final Fantasy X?
Final Fantasy X is my ultimate favorite one. Now, 7 is up there on my top, but 10 takes it for me. Is number one. Takes the number one spot for me. Especially like the gameplay, the storyline, and it's like the overall graphics of the Final Fantasy X back then on the PlayStation 2, phenomenal. Like,
Yeah. So, guys,
mhm.
Final Fantasy X came out in 2001, and this game was a technological marvel upon its release. Like we had never seen a video game look like this. It was so good. And kind of how I got into it, a lot of Final Fantasy fans are going to hate me about what I'm about to say. So let's just go ahead and get it over with. I played Kingdom Hearts first. And Kingdom Hearts is an action RPG that's also made by Square. Actually, I think like Final Fantasy X was the last SquareSoft game, then they became Square Enix. But Kingdom Hearts like has a lot of Final Fantasy characters in it, and they're not like they're characterizations of the Final Fantasy characters. They're not really the characters. And so I'm like, oh, Titus, like, oh, it's gonna be another ARPG. And so I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth with Final Fantasy X. Having said that, if you are going to play this game, guys, play the remasters of this game. Phenomenal game, crazy story, a lot of crazy stuff in this game. You got Titus, you got Yuna, crazy love story. Like, yeah, this game was crazy. This game, like, so many people cosplay as like Titus and Yuna. This game might have been like. Some Final Fantasy fans would argue, I'm going to say something really controversial here, that this was the last game in the franchise. Some Final Fantasy fans say this. This game, yeah, like this maybe isn't the best Final Fantasy game, but this game was so ambitious at the time that it's just like there's just so much to love here. And this was, I believe, the last Final Fantasy game in the mainline series with a turn-based system. JD, do you have anything more you want to say about Final Fantasy X?
So, in terms of Kingdom Hearts, I am also a Kingdom Hearts fan as well as Final Fantasy. Kingdom Hearts is actually, if you guys don't know this, fun fact is that Kingdom Hearts is based off of Final Fantasy, but through Disney, basically. Square, back then it used to be called Square, now they're called Square Enix. They teamed up with Disney to create a Final Fantasy version for Disney. So that's why you have Mickey, Donald, Goofy, and all the other Disney characters within the universe. So, little fun fact right there, if you guys did not know. So Final Fantasy X, I don't know why you say that you don't like it, but it's really good. Like, especially like playing the remastered version years ago when it came out for the PlayStation 3, it was remarkable.
Okay, so let's unpack a couple things. Okay, so my expectations, you have to understand, I was maybe like 9 years old, right? 10 years old, somewhere around there. I was 9. And the game had been released, Kingdom Hearts came out, and I was expecting. Okay, so for lack of a better term, guys, Kingdom Hearts is over. Like the first game is very simple. It's good versus evil. You know, it's an action RPG. It's a very simple game. You know what I mean? From a narrative perspective and from a gameplay perspective, it's incredibly simple, and that's kind of the appeal of the game. Kingdom Hearts 2, one of the most complicated stories in video gaming history. So much to where I've beaten Kingdom Hearts 2 like 5 times and I still don't know what happens. I've watched 4-hour videos, but we're digressing. Like, my point is, guys, that my expectations for Final Fantasy X were that it was going to be a simple ARPG. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case, and so I think that's kind of what hurt me. But I can still respect the game, JD. Does that make any sense? Like, I still respect the game. I like the characters. I can still acknowledge that this is a phenomenal game.
Okay, yeah, I can accept that.
So moving forward, guys. So you thought Final Fantasy VII was a departure. This next game was a massive departure. It was such a departure that a lot of people got lost. Still a really good game, but a lot of people got lost with Final Fantasy XI. They're like, what is going on? Who am I? Okay, so this was during the early 2000s when MMOs were on the rise. So Final Fantasy 11, JD, thoughts?
Final Fantasy 11, it was good. Not the best, but it was good. The gameplay was okay. Again, like going back, this is like the era where Final Fantasy start dropping off for me again, especially because like the storyline didn't really catch me. But at the same time, the gameplay was okay. It was good. But yeah, it wasn't the best that I played.
So every Final Fantasy game kind of like tries to push the envelope. Like 10 really like set the stage for like the PS2.
Yeah,
Final Fantasy. Oh, what were you gonna say?
Oh, so yeah, I'm saying like Final Fantasy X really set the stage, like you said. Final Fantasy 11 just really didn't live up to what the hype was going to be.
100%. I totally agree with you. Final Fantasy 11 did one thing really well. Okay. It was the first, I believe it was the first MMO on a console.
True.
So, you know, and people still play this game today. So there's a hardcore Final Fantasy 11 fan base. So moving forward, guys, Final Fantasy 12, JD, what are your thoughts?
So after Final Fantasy 10 and playing a little bit of 11, I stopped playing Final Fantasy, so I did not play Final Fantasy 12.
12 just, I mean, it was 12. Like, you got a lot of people that like 12, but the series is you know, there's kind of it's okay. This game, okay, the best way to describe it is this game is like an MMO without any of the fun, like without being able to play with other people. Yeah, 12 just kind of was like, it's better than the next game in the franchise, but you know, yeah, I mean, you know, you probably could skip 12, to be honest.
Definitely could skip 12.
The infamous, the almost like legendarily infamous Final Fantasy 13. This was not a lucky number for Square, by the way.
We don't talk about this one.
Okay, this game.
At least I don't.
Okay, look. Okay, they released 13, 13.2, and 13.3, and it's like, I don't know who I am.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I haven't played 13. I've seen game footage of 13, and I still am confused on 13, what's going on.
13 is always the game. Okay. Final Fantasy 14. Okay, so 14, terrible launch, horrible launch. And this was also an MMO. So they released 11, then 14 was also an MMO. A massively multiplayer online role-playing game, for those of you who don't know. And then they released Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, significantly better, now one of the best MMOs of all time. Having said that, once again, we've kind of lost ourselves. And this is why a lot of people say, hey, like, after 10, I kind of just checked out, right? It's like an MMO, what?
Basically, after 10, most of us who are fans of the franchise checked out.
So, yeah, so 14 was pretty cool. A lot of fun stuff in 14. I would actually say that 14 was the best game after 10. That's just my opinion, though. Still being supported to this day. If you guys are going to go play 14, still being supported to this day. MMO. I don't know what else to say. Final Fantasy 15.
Oh, God, I have a lot of gripe with this one.
Dudes pushing a car.
Okay, so if you guys don't know, Final Fantasy 15 was the first to not do the turn-by-turn base gameplay. It was like open world. They promised a lot of things, a lot of adventures, a lot of side quests. Like, they just overhyped Final Fantasy 15, and I was one of them that fell for it. So for me, as before Final Fantasy X being my absolute favorite, I thought Final Fantasy 15 was going to revitalize the series. It did not. They promised a lot of things on launch day that didn't come out for fruition. Did not happen until later updates, later DLCs and stuff like that. The one that they promised us on launch day. It was overall an incomplete Final Fantasy game. where to the point where they had to release a new edition called the Royal Edition, where they literally had all the DLCs and everything that they promised the original Final Fantasy 15 would have. So for me being an idiot, thinking that this was going to revitalize the series for me, I decided to go ahead and buy the Ultimate Collector's Edition that came with the steelbooks, the movies, the TV show, the figurine of Noctis, and everything like that. Final Fantasy 15, even though it is a good game overall, I enjoy playing it. The storyline was short. Like the thing is that like the battle simulation was the like when you're fighting against enemies, that one was refreshing and really liked that. But other than that, like the storyline and everything was just not what I expected to be, and not what we were promised by Square Enix.
Okay. So, Final Fantasy 15, probably you could probably skip it, to be honest, unless you're like a massive fan of the franchise. I played it, wasn't terrible. Fun fact that this game was announced back in 2006 as Final Fantasy 13.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Final Fantasy 13.
Right. And so great graphics. We're in the 8th generation of gaming by this point, but this game is kind of like if Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy had a little baby, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, the gameplay really did change with 12, but like this one was very like ARPG, like Kingdom Hearts. And you'd think I'd like it more, but it just doesn't tick the boxes for me. You know, and
same for me too. I have to say, same for me too. It was a total disappointment because I thought, again, like they hyped it up too much, you know.
Well, yeah, and they do a lot, and that's kind of the running, like, I mean, a running theme with Final Fantasy is a lot of these games are hyped up. This is kind of like the poster child for JRPGs. You know what I mean? And so yeah. Okay, so before we get to 16, let's talk about some of the side games. Final Fantasy X had a sequel. What do you think about 10-2?
I didn't play 10-2, unfortunately.
Okay.
10-2 was unable to get 10-2.
10-2 was not as good as 10, but it's still kind of a little fun little game. So if you're a huge fan of 10, it continues the story. Final Fantasy IV, The After Years, is a sequel to Final Fantasy IV, obviously. Kind of interesting. It was released in episodic format. Some of my recommendations, I know we're kind of going a little fast here, so we're going to slow it down for a second. Some of my recommendations for side games: Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles and Final Fantasy Tactics. Have you played any of those games?
No, I mostly just stick to the main games. I don't play the sideline games.
Tactics is really good. Crystal Chronicles could have been a mainline game, but it's just kind of very, very chibi kind of type game. Tactics, amazing game. Go play it. It's fun. Trying to think of what else there is. There's Final Fantasy VII Snowboarding, which we don't really want to talk about. There's Cerberus. I remember that one.
Okay, I think the one that is kind of like a side is Type 0, which I played that. That one's okay. It again like is really not good. I just play like a little bit and then I just stopped playing overall altogether.
So Final Fantasy is, in my opinion, baby's first JRPG, right? There's obviously other ones. There's Dragon's Quest, there's Persona, there's like all kinds of other there's Xenosaga, you know, like there's so much other stuff, you know. I mean, a lot of people would say Pokemon is baby's first JRPG, but really Final Fantasy is actually.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Because Final Fantasy, you get the tropes, the obscenely long games with the obscenely crazy stories with people with obscenely crazy hair, right? You know, but you get like these really interesting gameplay systems, you know. You get a lot of interesting stuff. So on the whole, guys, you know, Final Fantasy, if you want to get into the franchise, actually 10. If you want to get into the franchise, play 10. Because it's because a lot of the other ones, like they're really archaic in the graphics. The graphics are kind of outdated. If you like 10, if you like that turn-based gameplay, then maybe play 6, right? And then if you're like, okay, I really like 10, but like I want to play something. I want to play, maybe play 7, maybe play 8, maybe go back and play those ones, and then see kind of where you're at. And if you don't like 10, then my recommendation is actually to play 16, which is the game we're going to talk about right now. So Final Fantasy 15, Kingdom Hearts, and Devil May Cry, or not Devil May Cry, Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy have a little baby. They make Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 16, the newest one, is Kingdom Hearts, or not Kingdom Hearts. Actually, yeah, a little bit of Kingdom Hearts in there.
A little bit.
Final Fantasy, 4, kind of, you get that medieval stuff, and then you get Devil May Cry. If you guys haven't played Devil May Cry 5, very similar gameplay. So this one's all over the place. JD, what are your thoughts on Final Fantasy 16 so far?
So far from the game footage that I've seen from live streamers and like channels like IGN and stuff like that, Final Fantasy 16 is all right. I have not personally played it myself. I have not personally picked it up, but I just hear a lot of it's an okay Final Fantasy game,
So, yeah, I've played it. I played the demo, and I've played a little bit. My brother's been playing it. So, Final Fantasy 16, guys, is visually stunning.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the visuals, the graphics, everything is beautiful.
Thematically, it's really good. The theme, I like that they're going back to kind of like a medieval European type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Gameplay, it's Devil May Cry 5. Yeah, overall, this is actually a really good game. But it's very like negative. It's very. It's very like the story's like really depressing in a lot of ways. Like you're just like this guy, and like they hate you. Everybody hates you. And it's just like, all right. I don't know what the thought process was when making this the plot, but okay. There was a controversy. There's a lack of diversity in this game. JD, what are your thoughts on that? I know Final Fantasy as a whole, maybe has had this problem, to some degree or another. I never really looked at it as a problem, but in this game, it was, it's brought up. I personally don't see it as a problem, but JD, what are your thoughts on the diversity problem?
Honestly, to be honest, I haven't really noticed. I think that's I don't take it as you will. I really haven't noticed about that. I don't pay attention to that type of thing,
So
especially when like the game itself is taken back in like medieval times. So really, it's like I don't really pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, like there were people of color in medieval times, and
I know, but like it's the storyline. It's yeah.
Okay, so here's my opinion on the matter. I just think like it's Japan. They're not sensitive to a lot of our Western issues. And so I think that they were just trying to make the best game that they could, and I think that I don't think this is an issue, guys. I just wanted to bring up the controversy because it is something that has been mentioned in this game. But yeah, there is definitely a lack of diversity in the game, but I don't necessarily view that as a bad thing, right? Like if this game were like about like American history, might be a problem there, but no, this game is kind of trying to be its own deal, and I think a lot of us, I think like a lot of people, like we get too sensitive around these topics, Let us know in the comments if we're being crazy, but that's just my opinion. JD, closing thoughts on Final Fantasy 16, and we'll kind of go over the series as a whole.
So, looking at the gameplay and the reviews and everything like that, it's a game that I will eventually pick up, but not at the moment. It looks good. Like the gameplay, like the gameplay and the visuals are very stunning. Storyline, again, like you said, the storyline is very depressing. It's like you follow this character who is really hated on, and like it's just, oh, boohoo me type of storyline.
It
I
might
will have
get
to
better.
say,
I don't know.
yeah, it may get better, but at the same time, it's like, I already got disappointed with Final Fantasy 15, and I was hesitant, and I'm still hesitant to pick up 16 because of what happened for me when I got 15.
So
So
15, is the one thing I'll say about 15 is it's its own thing in the franchise. 16, I don't know. It's I think this game, we've had a lot of good games come out these last few months. We had Diablo 4.
mhm.
We
Speaking
had
of
Street
which, I
Fighter
need to pick
6.
up. Mhm.
We had and then obviously this game. So in my opinion, guys, if you like single player narrative experiences, then Final Fantasy is for you. The JRPG genre is for you, right? If you like the single player narrative stuff. If you like quick, fast, kind of like beat the game in like 10 hours or 8 hours or 4 hours or whatever, that's not this franchise. Okay, this franchise is 80 plus hour games, like
You're in it for the story, basically.
100%. So yeah, closing thoughts, JD, on Final Fantasy as a whole.
Final Fantasy as a whole, it's an alright franchise. It has its ups, it has its downs, just like every franchise, just like every series. There are going to be games that you like better than I do. There's going to be games that I like better than you guys. Again, it's each his own. It's your preference on which game in the franchise that you guys like. For me, however, Final Fantasy X is the best of all. It's like number one.
Well, and the reason why, like, okay, let's go back to our recommendation. So, like, the reason why I'm recommending 10 is because you have that classic Final Fantasy, or really 10 HD remaster. So, if you guys can get that version, you have that classic Final Fantasy gameplay. There's still elements of that there, but with a more palatable visual style.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
Definitely.
So, if you like 10, 10's one like the last turn-based one. If you like 10, play 9, play 8, play 7, play 6, right? Play those ones. If you hate 10, play 16, 15, right? That's my recommendation. So, yeah, guys, this has been a really good podcast. I'm glad we were able to get it in under an hour. Cool. Well, anyways, guys, we do hope that you have a wonderful rest of your time. Let us know what we can do better. Join the Discord, thevoid.gg, to support us. And obviously you can find all of our links there. Yeah, until next time, guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye, guys.